The ultimate aim of the video is we should able to write this answer. I'm going to give the content. You should able to write it. That's it. The topic will be gender-based violence. First, understand what is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence. Gender, which means sexist. Either it prejudice towards any gender, whether it's women or transgender or LGBT community, not only women. Okay, first understand the current recognized forms of gender violence. What is the traditional for gender-based violence? It's traditionally seen as a criminal, social, or women's rights issue. But at current dispensation, it is not just seen as some criminal act, but something recognized as a public health crisis. Even WHO considers gender based violence as a global human rights and public health crisis. It is not just a criminal or stray incident. It's a predominantly happening in society. It's ubiquitous in society. First, you understand what are the forms of gender based violence. What do you mean by gender based violence? What are the examples of gender based violence? First one is intimate partner violence. It may be boyfriend, girlfriend, some living partner or casual sex person. The second one is domestic violence. It may be from family members, dowry harassment. That is also gender-based violence. And sexual harassment. Both are same. Trafficking, human trafficking, horn killings, cyber violence, stalking, workplace harassment. These are all gender-based violence. Trafficking, you know that sexual trafficking, human trafficking, that is also called as gender-based violence. First, you have to understand: is gender-based violence a really public health concern? Is it that much of predominance is there? Yes, the answer will be yes. It has a widespread prevalence. See, according to statistics, NCRB data, for the past years, from the past 20 to 15 years, we can see that continuously at least 90% of the rapes are committed by the known persons. You're going to get another doubt. Who are known persons? It may be anyone, whether it's a classmate or a person who's in bus stop, or for example, if she is a lawyer, her client maybe, or if she is a sales girl, her customer or neighbor, anyone are called as known persons. Remember, in this 90% of the rapes, this marital rape is excluded because in India, marital rape is not a crime. I mean, it's not subjected to Section 376, but domestic violence. It will be characterized as some domestic violence, but not rape. And another data, NHFS5 data indicates that 30% of the women have faced domestic violence. That's a different thing. 1 in 3 ever married women have experienced intellectual partner violence. It says that her husband beat her like that. But this data is not completely accurate. Reason being is that severe underreporting is also there because of the stigma, fear, social norms, etc. This all things somewhat it acts as a deterrence. Stigma, how society think. What if I go to police station? What if I complain in the courts? That much of stigma is there. And what will the consequences of health? It will physical health burden, injuries, disability, miscarriages, poor antenatal care, pregnancy care, mental health consequences, triggers depression, anxiety, PTSD, substance abuse, suicide risk. And also, WHO in its recent report says that victims of sexual abuse face 2 times higher risk of severe mental illness. And obviously, it's going to have some major impact on hidden hospital burden. Most victims report to hospitals, not police. But the hospitals don't know. Hospitals cannot even recognize whether the injuries are from a domestic violence or some accidents. It all ultimately leads to human capital erosion. Obviously, some SDG linkages: SDG 3 health, SDG 5 gender equality, universal health coverage. Okay, we understand the prevalence. What you in the earlier 2 3 minutes you understand the date of it. Now we understand the prevalence of global gender violence. What is the mindset? Why it is happening at the first place? The first one is social and cultural norms, patriarchal structures, male control, violence is normalized. Psychological and behavioral factors, childhood exposure to violence, toxic masculinity, substance abuse, education, for example, misogynistic media content, safe digital literacy training. They don't know whether they can report it or not, and obviously economic vulnerability. Even global gender gap index says that only 40% of the gap is closed. Even in political spheres or economic sphere, women are underrepresented in both political and economic. And obviously legal institution challenges, slow judiciary, 27% rape convention 2022, under-reporting, insensitive policing. We have very micro, less than 10% of the police population is females. It's male dominated. Police is typically male dominated. And obviously some governance issues, technological and cyberspace challenges, we'll see later again anyway. And also the thing is intersectional inequalities, that's a very important concept. Caste, religion, regional factors, rural urban divides, higher violence, and lower access to justice for vulnerable groups. I mean, for example, Dalit lady, she has the high propensity to be, to being violated. LGBTQ, rural women, Adivasi. We don't know. There is actually no patriotism. No patriotism. There is no weak law enforcement in these areas. In rural areas, police surveillance is very weak. LGBT community, even they are more prone to that. And if you observe, first you have to link with when will global gender violence. I mean, gender violence. When will it increases? In disaster situations. Global gender violence and disaster crisis situation. There is actually in the just what we're going to discuss is that climate change. Climate change is directly proportional to global gender violence. If climate change is increasing, global gender violence is going to increase. That's it. That's just we're going to discuss. We are going to discuss it briefly anyway. So according to UN Spotlight Initiative, climate change directly linked to rise in global gender violence. That's it. This is what you have to write in the mains examination. That climate change directly proportional to rise in global gender violence. If one degree rise in global temperature is 4.7% increase in domestic violence. That's it. For example, if you see COVID-19 in India saw 2.5x rise in domestic violence complaints. If you see Nepal earthquake, Ukraine war, these are all breeding ground for gender violence, human trafficking. I already told you, for example, earthquake happened. Earthquake happened means police are going to be very busy in other situations. Then it is a breeding ground for human trafficking. Floods, for example, Ukraine war, several women have been abducted by Russian forces. Floods, cyclone Amplia, all showing spikes of trafficking and abuse and child marriage. That's it. Then another thing, economic trigger. For example, see, unemployment lead to frustration. Frustration will lead to male aggression. Women forced into unsafe exploitative work. Income collapse in informal sector, COVID-19. For example, if you see COVID-19, women several uh, maid work typically gone. So women domestic workers lost income, increasing dependency on abusive men. But disasters happen. Women will not become no, they cannot become independent on their own, and that's it. Is all. It's not that common points. And obviously, minimal climate funds allocated to gender equality. Funding and policy for a minimum climate funds allocated to gender equality. These are all common points they can read anyway. That's it. Empower. No, but what is the way forward? What are the things we have to consider? It's a way forward. Global recommendations for the United Nations. What United Nations said about what should be the ideal cases. Empowering women in climate leadership, strengthening civil society movements, support grassroots gender justice groups, push gender rights in global forums. All common points you can read anyway. And if we observe, see, this is all. What I want to say is that in urban areas, gender violence is typically more than rural areas. Reason being is that greater visibility will be there, legal awareness will be there. Women in urban areas are typically educated. They know their rights. They typically report it. High reporting will be there when compared to rural areas. That's it. And again, slums, domestic help, employer abuse redressal, and some challenges in responding to global gender violence. What are challenges? Health sphere, no global gender violence screening. For example, if any victim gone to hospital, she, she doesn't know how to report it. For example, if you see uh, human traffickers typically send their victims to the hospitals, but our hospitals fail to recognize them, whether the case is really a normal accident or some deliberate gender violence. And normally some lack of women cops are there. Judiciary is also overburdened with already several cases. 2.4 years typically took for rape case disposal. Government schemes are siloed. There will be schemes so different. State will have different schemes and center will have different schemes. And private stigma, honor, no peer support, caste, class, religion amplify the risk. As I already told you, for example, Adivasi women or people from LGBT, they typically face more global gender violence than a normal straight woman. That's it. Media sensitization, name leaks, cyber deep fakes, revenge porn. These are all very important. Deep fakes, revenge porn, online misogynistic rampant. That's it. This is actually the first video. I'm going to upload another video